try to help booksellers who need our assistance. Cool. All right, we got one more person coming in, and then we'll get started. Thanks for your patience. Cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Gresco. Welcome to the Antibody, a quarantine reading series part of LitHub's virtual book channel. The heat and humidity in Brooklyn tonight is brutal. I've lived without an air conditioner for my entire adult life, but this year has just been too much. The heat on top of everything else has just been like a pressure cooker. So I'm very grateful to have a new air conditioner and not be just sweating profusely here with you tonight, having a little relief. I hope that wherever you're calling from, you're doing what you can to keep comfortable and healthy in body and mind. And the Antibody is here tonight to help you a little bit with that, bringing you a dose of great literature for your spirit. We have 3 authors I'm so excited about, each of them with recent nonfiction books out in the world. Porochista Khakpour is here, Meredith Talusan is here, and Justin Taylor is here. So before we share this virtual experience together, I hope you will just join me in just taking a deep breath and settling your body back so that you can appreciate their words. Please keep your mic on mute. We don't have a stage, but we do have a microphone. So let's honor the authors as they have it, as each author is going to read to us for a little bit. And at the end of the event, there will be time for Q&A, so be ready for that. And the chat is public so that you can show your appreciation for the authors. And please do, often and enthusiastically. So without further ado, will you please get your keys clicking and your fingers tapping and give a warm welcome to our first author, Meredith Talusan. Meredith is an award-winning author and journalist who has written for The Guardian, The New York Times, The Atlantic, The Nation, Wired, Self, and Condé Nast Traveler, among many other publications, and has contributed to several essay collections. She has received awards from GLAAD, the Society of Professional Journalists, and the National Lesbian and Gay Journalists Association. She is also the founding executive editor of THEM, Condé Nast LGBTQ+ digital platform, where she is currently contributing editor. And she is the author of Fairest, a memoir, which is her first book. Meredith, welcome.
First book, hooray. Yeah, it's taken this long. I'm kind of a restless person, but it's been wonderful. And thank you so much for having me, Brian. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm gonna read from the book, so I've just come from, kind of like a 1 month of virtual tour with kind of like numerous dates. And one of the things that I realized as I was doing this tour, so I was doing something kind of unconscious, which was this novel tracks my life from being an albino kid in the Philippines to my gender transition in America. And then there's kind of a middle section where I was a gay man at Harvard. And I noticed that I don't read a lot from that section. And I think it's like this really weird thing where there's this convention that trans women are kind of like hesitant to talk about their pre-transition life. And I realized that that's not actually the case with me for myself, but the reason why I don't do it is kind of like my anticipation of audience reaction. And so I decided to read this sort of like sexy little passage from that section, which is, it's just to situate you, the summer between my junior and senior year of college, I spent the summer in London researching for my senior thesis on Renaissance women's literature. But when I was not deep in the bowels of the British Library, I was exploring London. And in this particular case, I was exploring a men's bath called the Pleasure Dome. Which is where this particular passage is set. And here's the book, but because of my vision being not that great, I'm going to read from my iPad. All right. Outside the Waterloo station that evening, I followed the directions on the card I found at the phone booth earlier that day and took stone steps that led down to a glossy black door framed by a brick arch underneath the train tracks. There was no obvious place to ring, but I spied a gray button set discreetly on the doorframe and pressed. A buzzer sounded. I opened the door. There was a man collecting money right inside. I paid him, and he motioned me to a curtained area, which I shifted aside with one hand to walk through. There were rubber mats on the floor and long benches on one side of the room. On the other two sides were lockers. There was a pile of towels on one of the benches. I was the only one there and had not been given instructions, but I figured I should take off my clothes, which I did slowly, then took a towel and wrapped it around my waist. I took my pile of clothes to the lockers, metallic gray with orange nubs sticking out, that held keys with elastics attached. I noted that there were at least a dozen nubs that had no keys and wondered if that was crowded or light for a Saturday night. Even before I opened the metal door to the next room, I could feel vibration emanating from the other side. I turned the knob and found myself in a concrete space lit in stark pools of light, with several shower stalls on one side and the dark orange light of a sauna on the other. Several naked figures inside who I only saw in the periphery of my vision. I hung up my towel on a hook and turned on the shower, too cold, yet I stepped under it anyway, eager to dull the pulse of my senses, as I suddenly became aware that the throbbing sounds in my head were not only from my heart, but the insistent beat of techno music. Alone when I entered the room, I realized that there were several men who had come in, all of them middle-aged, too paunchy and pale, while one was dark and hairy. I imagined instant lives for these men, how maybe one of the pale ones was a postman, and the dark one, handsome in his solidity, even though the hair cover on his chest did not immediately pull me, was a married businessman from India who dallied on work trips. Then I realized they must have come to see the new meat up for offer. And from their languorous movements, their bodies like gentle waves, I could tell they liked what they saw, even if I couldn't quite believe it. I walked past them to an area that seemed purgatorial, toilets on one side and sinks with mirrors on the other, lit and fluorescent. Yet I noticed as I reached the end of that area and nodded at a man with a newsboy cap on, sitting on a stool and monitoring the proceedings, that the room on the other side must be much bigger because the sound coming from it was reverberant compared to the cramped thuds on my side. I was too far inside my head to notice until I got there that I was actually on a balcony and that a whole other floor lay before me, so the room was double the height of the others, which somehow made it feel airy despite being underground. The monitor instructed me to keep my towel on when walking to and fro, as I looked down to find more men swimming naked in a pool and lounging at a jacuzzi. I associated locker rooms with being the short, skinny runt in a litter of men, but in that English bath, it became apparent that I improbably was one of the prized. As I sucked in my stomach to show off my nearly washboard abs, I quickly scanned the area to see if there was anyone promising, and was disappointed to find none, though I was hopeful they would reveal themselves as I got closer. There was a steam room by the pool, and I opened the door to clouds of smoke that revealed a clutch of men, connected and breathing heavily, which I decided was not my scene, or at least not yet. So I, a bit theatrically, remembering my childhood status as the only blonde kid in a land of dark-haired people, settled my towel on a lounge chair and stretched for a while before diving into the water. As my head bobbed up to the surface, aware that many eyes were trained on me, I realized how much I'd missed being the automatic center of attention. I hadn't felt that in years, since I got to the States and was one fair-skinned blonde boy among many. I swam back and forth and tried to enjoy the feeling of the water, imagined myself as a slippery groper that none of these men could catch. I emerged from the pool and stepped into the sunken hot tub, where I sat among pink-skinned men with ordinary faces, aware that mine did stand out among them, as I inwardly admired my sharp cheekbones that made me, in the image of myself I saw in the eyes of those men, seem foreign and exotic. Finish? One of the men a few feet from me asked. I shook my head, then said American, and the man smiled in relief as he tried to chat me up, what brought me to England and all that. I imagined what my friend would do, that boy with heavy lidded eyes who had expounded on glory holes in my English seminar long ago. I'm a student on holiday, I said. Do you like London? It's fine. As I finished with him, I stretched out my body and leaned back, spread my arms around the lip of that circular hole in the ground, then closed my eyes. Maybe this was all I needed. Maybe this was worth the 10 pounds, this feeling of being wanted, even if I didn't want back. I smiled at the sudden thought that this was all economic, except the trade was not in money, but in desire. Aware of my stock's value, I was unwilling to involve myself with anyone who was not of comparable wealth. This was not the system I grew up with, the one that prized qualities like kindness and loyalty above all else, that didn't think of desire the same as capital. But this was something I didn't need to worry too much about when I was the one who led the market. There was a pleasant thrum in the periphery of my vision when I opened my eyes, a slim shape that emerged from the pool and came to join me in the hot tub. There was confidence in his expression from the moment I could fully discern his face, eyes full of mischief and pleasant symmetry. He had clearly seen what was on offer in this place and judged himself a prize, just like I had done. Now that he was here with me, we could come together because we were worthy of each other. I introduced myself, and he recognized my accent as American. His name was Danny. I'm not going to try to do this accent, but I'm from Liverpool, he said, pronouncing pool a millisecond longer than I expected as his intonation rose and his lips pursed. I resisted the urge to copy him. So what brings you here, I asked. Same as everyone, he replied. I'm new to blokes. I've a lass at home. He added that he worked in construction, which explained his tan complexion, his ease of movement with muscles developed during doing manual labor, not sculpted at the gym like mine. Danny's body angled toward me, inviting, but I had no idea how to make a move. I averted my glance, not wanting to seem too eager, and tried to focus on the feeling of the water as it surged around me, the sound of it suffusing my senses as the techno beat and humanity drifted away. But like a taut rubber band, my mind snapped back to Danny when his foot grazed my calf, an accident that wasn't quite. I shifted closer to him, and it wasn't long before his arm clasped my shoulder. I turned to see drops of water like dew on his elfin yet rugged face, like a fool in a Shakespeare play, undressed to reveal himself as the hero. Touchstone turned Orlando. It felt silly to think of Shakespeare as his mouth met mine, and his kiss felt so pure in all that water around us, which made it feel easier to engage in unclean acts. I reached down to touch him, and he was already hard beneath the surface of the water. I stared into his light eyes, not the blue of an artificial pool, but the aqua of the sea, and watched him exert control over his desire as I stroked, which I couldn't do when he touched me. The shock of my want too unbearable, as my back arched and my eyes went blind from the glare of the lights on the ceiling. He smiled when I opened my eyes to reveal a gap in his teeth, which only made him more adorable. I was partly draped on top of him then, so he extricated himself and patted me on the head before he got out of the tub. I rolled my eyes not to follow him, figuring he wanted the fun of being chased or the feeling that I was still the worthy catch and not the overeager young man who would surrender at his whim. Such excitement as I turned onto my stomach and set my chin on the lip of the tub to both pursue and be pursued, never really knowing which was which. It was only then that I noticed that the audience for our act, how the other men had given us room in the tub, but had been at the pool on the lounge chairs as I got out to look for Danny. I expected to find him in the steam room where we could continue our encounter, but couldn't make out his figure in the cloud of smoke. So I walked upstairs to see if he was in the sauna. Good show, the monitor told me as I passed his post. Might want to be more discreet. I nodded then, embarrassed, remembering his first instruction about keeping my towel around my waist. I wondered whether this was why Danny left abruptly, at the knowledge that I wasn't playing by rules I didn't understand in the first place. As I got to the sauna and didn't find him there, I became convinced that I'd once again managed to fuck things up. I decided to clear my head in the shower, try to get over losing the only man there that I wanted. There were going to be other occasions, other times, yet I was also aware that the experience would have been significant for reasons I couldn't entirely name. I got out of the shower and took another towel to dry off, then trying to find a receptacle for my old one. I padded over to the toilet and sink area, put the old towel in a bin, and looked in the mirror to find Danny behind me. I turned around and he took my hand, pulled me into a bathroom stall, and leaned me against one wall as we kissed. And I found myself licking his neck, his chest, his nipples, with the rapaciousness I didn't know was in me, while he put his hand on my flank and firmly guided my body. His cock in my mouth unleashed a desire I didn't think existed, a want that rose from his casual, effortless masculinity. I stopped him when he made a move for my cock, asked him to kiss me while I jerked myself off until I came. I didn't know why I didn't want to see his mouth on that body part, but I didn't. There was something about it that would ruin the moment. Let's go to your flat, he asked. I'm at a hostel. It's not private. My gal's at home, but she's at her job tomorrow. We agreed to meet in front of the sauna the next day. In the locker area, I asked him if I should get his contact information in case something came up. Danny found a piece of scrap paper in his bag and scrawled a number on it, then pecked me on the lips before he walked out in his rain jacket and jeans. I took the train to Waterloo Station the next morning and walked across the bridge down to the sauna entrance. When Danny was 15 minutes late, I began to pace back and forth so it didn't seem like I was lurking. I wanted to call him, but was afraid we would miss each other. But after 40 minutes, I finally decided to look for a payphone. I asked a passerby for help, and she told me that the closest one was next to the Thames, near the National Theatre. I dialed the number Danny gave me once I got to the red phone booth that overlooked the river and watched pedestrians cross the Waterloo Bridge in the distance while I waited for someone to pick up. After several rings, a woman's voice in an answering machine came on. This is London Travel. Please leave a message at the sound of the tone. I called the number again and got the same response, then again and again. It was starting to rain when I got out of the booth and walked out back to the tube. Though I got other men to sleep with me over the next few weeks, I found myself dreaming of Danny as I lay on the top bunk of my hostel bed, the ceiling so close I could touch it, wishing that the white blankness was Danny's body. Something about him being new to blokes resonated with me, and how it guided my body like he was used to being in charge in a way I wasn't used to when I slept with other men, a way that I liked. I was convinced I wouldn't find that again.
Wow, thank you, Meredith. That was electric. Oh my goodness. Everyone, please show some love and appreciation. That was that was very awesome.
It was fun.
Yeah, thank you for choosing that selection.
You're welcome. I wish I still had that almost flat stomach.
Aging is merciless. I'm putting a link in the chat here. Please support our authors and pick up a copy of Meredith Talusan's memoir, Fairest. That's a link to bookshop.org, which will help connect you to your local independent bookstore or help funnel some of the money to a local independent bookstore. So support bookstores, support Meredith, and find out more of what the story is. Such a tantalizing part to read in the middle. I love it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Our next author is Justin Taylor. Justin is the author of the memoir Riding with the Ghost, as well as the novel The Gospel of Anarchy and the story collections Everything Here is the Best Thing Ever and Flings. His work has appeared in The New Yorker, Harper's, Bomb, and the Sewanee Review. and he lives in Portland, Oregon, where he's joining us from tonight. Welcome, please, everyone, get those fingers tapping and those keys going, and welcome Justin Taylor. Hi, Justin.
Hey, Brian. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Meredith and Porochista, for being here. It's so nice to see everyone and to get together like this. So this is the book. Came out last week, and I'm going to read from it. I need to tell you by way of preface, hopefully not much. It's a book about my father, about our relationship, his life, and death, and the first year of after his passing, and sort of reevaluating a lot of stuff. It's also a book about teaching. It's about losing a student. About a lot of stuff, but in the section I'm going to read you, very little of that actually features. This is about my dad and I. He was living in an extended stay hotel in Nashville, and we had to relocate him to South Florida. And then there arose this issue of reuniting him with a bunch of shit that he'd had in a storage unit. So this is a little bit all about that, and sort of leading up to this drive that I took with him. So if there seems like there's some loose ends in this, it's because there are. It's just stuff I forgot to tell you. It's elsewhere in the book. Anyway, after my cousin Michael bought Dad the apartment because it was cheaper in the long run than renting one for him, to say nothing of what it was costing per week for the hotel room, there arose the issue of reuniting him with his belongings. This must have been late 2013 or early 2014. At least some of the stuff, as he always called it, was really all of ours. Family pictures, sets of dishes, mine, my sister's childhood things, book collections, school projects, stuffed animals, whatever. But most of it was his. Boxes and boxes of papers from jobs he held decades ago, ancient tax records, his vinyl collection. In the old days, he always had the radio on or the turntable going, belting along as the mood struck, at home or in the car, or even in public sometimes, singing half under his breath. After he sold the house and moved into the hotel, he stopped listening to music and was perfectly frank about the fact that he would probably never own another record player. In fact, he did own a record player, along with a stereo receiver and speakers, the same rig he'd had since the 70s, kept in mint condition all these years, and it still sounded good as new. But it was in the storage unit with the rest of the stuff. He didn't want to listen to the music anymore, had no interest in hearing the grand anthems and love songs of his heyday, all those lyrics he still knew by heart but would no longer sing along with. He had, of course, not so long ago told my sister that the collection was probably worth some money and suggested she try to sell it. And yet now the idea of parting with the records had become unthinkable to him. All the stuff was in a storage unit in Nashville, and he was in South Florida, and he wanted it all shipped to him. My mother, for her part, was ready to be rid of the storage unit, which she had been paying for years. Christ, the way these things have of dragging on, so it feels like time itself has gone gummy. Every issue a quicksand, poverty, depression, indecision, a black hole that neither spits you out nor sucks you in. By the time this imbroglio resolved itself, the very word stuff was effectively soiled. To this day, my wife cringes to hear it. Dad hadn't wanted to leave the stuff behind in Nashville in the first place. He was quick to point out that we wouldn't be having this problem now if we'd just listened to him then and brought it with us when we moved him. But this, I reminded him, had been impossible because at the time, the family did not trust him to make the drive alone, and my sister was in law school, so it fell to me to drive with him. And I'd been living in New York for so long that I didn't trust myself to drive a U-Haul with a car hitched to it. Plus, I didn't mention this to him. It had taken so long to get him to agree to move back to Florida that we were racing to get it done before he could change his mind. Compared to that problem, the idea of the stuff seemed nebulous and abstract. It was just a bunch of old shit in boxes, right? He hadn't needed it for this long. Nobody had needed any of it. We said to each other that once we got him settled in South Florida, his sense of imperative would soften, maybe disappear. This was a lie we told ourselves. We all knew Dad better than that. I didn't get my driver's license till I was 23. Growing up, I hated driving. I was scared of it. More than that, I hated taking lessons from Dad, who didn't trust Mom to give them and yet was so uptight himself that every lesson devolved into a fight. When I quit, he was happy to let me. Mom resented his coddling me on this point. She thought it was infantilizing, and the fact was, they could have used the help getting my sister to and from school and extracurriculars instead of having to ferry the both of us wherever we needed to go. My father defended my decision. He protected me, which I appreciated at the time and still appreciate, at least in principle, though in retrospect, I'm not sure that he was right to do so. Besides which, it's clear now that he was also protecting himself. The truth is that he was scared as I was, and probably even more scared, that I'd hurt myself, that I'd wreck a car he couldn't afford to replace, that I was growing up too fast. I learned to drive in college through trial and error, no major errors, thank God, while driving a drunk friend home in her own car or doing my share on a road trip, bit by bit until I could actually do it. The summer before I started grad school, the learner's permit I had acquired at 15 years old finally expired. I took the driving test in Tennessee, mostly so I'd have a valid ID in New York City. But over the next decade, I never found myself behind the wheel of a car more than once or twice a year. October 2013. 5 months after Dad's suicide attempt at the Nashville airport, I flew to Nashville and he picked me up. He'd parked the car in the garage, and there we were walking through it like this was a regular day and this was a normal place without any deeply upsetting psychic weight attached to it. And who knows, maybe for him it was. He got me my own room at his hotel using accrued loyalty points, which had been racking up again since May, as we had tried to convince him to come back to South Florida, while scrambling and failing to find a place to put him when he got there. Dad would have stayed at the hotel indefinitely, but in September, his mother had fallen and broken her hip. Since his father, George, was senile and Barbara was his full-time caretaker, they couldn't live alone while she recovered. They'd been installed at my Aunt Ronnie's apartment in Plantation, Florida. Ronnie used her spare bedroom as an office and was now sleeping on its fold-out couch so that George and Barbara could have the big bed and their own bathroom. We seized on this development and used it like a battering ram to break down Dad's resistance to relocation, which, insanely, he was still trying to cling to even after everything that had happened. I don't know if he thought Michael would just keep paying for him to live at the Nashville hotel forever, or if he'd planned to ride it out as long as he could and then try to kill himself again. I don't know what he thought. But once we had my grandparents at Ronnie's, we were able to insist that Dad take their empty apartment while his long-term arrangements were being worked out. We figured, correctly, in this case, that if we could just get him down to South Florida, he'd stay put. And we got him to agree to come by telling him that Ronnie and his parents would need his help. As ever, the only way to get him to do anything self-preserving was to convince him it was actually in the service of somebody else. The only problem with this plan was that it hadn't left us enough time to deal with the stuff. So now I was spending the night at the extended stay hotel that had been my father's pseudo home for most of the last 3 years. I wish I could say that the experience was profound or revelatory, but it wasn't. The hotel was anonymous and without character, which is the whole point of hotels like those. It felt like falling asleep inside a piece of clip art. We left Nashville early the next morning, the Nissan packed tight with clothing and a few boxes of I don't even know what. Whatever he deemed too precious to be left behind. I was supposed to be helping him with the driving, but he hardly let me behind the wheel. In those days, the tremors in his arms still went away when there was a task at hand. The engagement of his mind and body overrode whatever was misfiring inside him, and so the network of processes required to operate a car focused and soothed him. Also, he didn't say this, but I knew it. In his mind, I was still 16 and didn't know how to drive. The trip was going to be hard enough already without us having to wage a war over that, so I let it pass. He didn't seem to be a danger to himself or the other cars on the road. I did not feel unsafe, riding shotgun, fussing with the AC and the music while he cruised along, the hours chewing through the miles. Dad always had unfathomable stamina and discipline. When I was 3 years old and he was 33, he decided that he needed to get in shape. He got up one day at 5:30 in the morning and went for a run. To his dismay, he could hardly make it through 2 10-minute miles. He got up the next day and went again. He kept a log of his daily distances and times. Within a year, he was averaging 5 miles per day at 6 minutes per mile. To build core strength, he did 100 sit-ups every night, using the living room couch as a prop for his legs. He did this routine at home and on vacation 7 days a week, no matter what the weather was or how he felt or what else was going on. When he was forced to miss a day, the morning after we were all in a car accident and I was in the ICU, he started his count over again. And after that, did not miss another day for 28 years. That is, until his suicide attempt. A few days later, he started running again and continued to run, even as his body deteriorated, until he was staggering down the street in Sunrise Lakes, wearing hideous green runners, short shorts, and his coach t-shirt from the years he volunteered at the Special Olympics. By the time he finally gave it up, in the summer of 2016, I was older than he had been when he started. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Justin. Everyone, please take a moment and show some appreciation for Justin. That's like, wow, like I can't imagine a more different like tonal switch there from readings. That's intense. And I feel like you've yeah, like kind of now when I think of the word stuff, I'm gonna take these associations with me. Thank you. It's really absolutely powerful.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna put the link here to bookshop.org and check out a copy of Justin Taylor's memoir, Riding with the Ghost. It's also really a totally different note, Justin, but the background of your seeing you on the background of the wood like that. The last time I saw you was in the backyard at Pete's Candy Store. I'm not sure how long ago it was, but you were sitting next to the fence that also had the wooden backdrop, and it's taken me back to.
I love a pattern. Just yeah, but, always be in the foreground of a pattern.
But thank you so much. That was really, really powerful. All right, moving along to our final reader for the evening. It's Porochista Khakpour. Porochista is the author of the novels Suns and Other Flammable Objects, and The Last Illusion, and the memoir Stick. Among her many fellowships is the National Endowment for the Arts Award. Her nonfiction has appeared in many sections of the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, Elle, Slate, Salon, and Book Forum, among many other venues. She has been guest faculty at VCFA and Stone Coast's MFA program, as well as contributing editor at Evergreen Review. Her new book, Brown Album, is her first collection of essays, just out from Vintage Books. Born in Tehran and raised in the Los Angeles area, Porochista currently lives in New York City, where she's joining us. Everyone, please get those fingers tapping and those keys clicking to welcome Porochista Khakpour. Hi, Porochista.
Hi, thank you so much, Brian. I'm very sorry I double booked the last time I was supposed to be on this. I'm glad I got this right. I've been very bad at scheduling during lockdown, so glad. And I'm so glad I'm reading with Meredith and Justin. That was so amazing, both of you. So I'm going to read from, Brown Album. I'm going to read the first essay of the second section, which is the newer essays here. And this is an essay that I've been reading a few times during the tour, not that much, but like prior to this tour, I really had never read it out loud. So it's an episodic essay, you'll see. It's called 13 Ways of Being an Immigrant. 1. The year is 1983 and Cabbage Patch Kids are at the height of their popularity. You want one, but you know your parents can't afford it. A couple of years into living in this country and they keep telling you they will go back to Iran soon, that the war will be over, that the revolution will be done, that you will be a refugee and alien no more. But for now, there's little money. At school, you know you're one of the few kids with less access to things, and you know the others are not from here either. You work with them to get out of ESL, and you try to act like the kids who belong here, who have money. One way to do this is to have a Cabbage Patch Kid doll, but this seems impossible. Still, your mother takes you to Toys R Us, which seems like the greatest place on earth, second only to Disneyland, which you've only heard about since it also costs too much to go. At Toys R Us, several aisles are devoted to the Cabbage Patch dolls. If it were a farm, this area would be the Cabbage Patch. Their chubby faces peer at you from behind the plastic of their boxes. You have not considered which one you want because you don't think you'll ever get one. Maybe an imitation at some point, one without the signature on the butt, which is how you've heard you know they're real. True Cabbage Patch Kids, the real ones, come with butt tattoos. You are looking at them longingly when your mother points to a section down the aisle. There's a big sign, sale. There's a whole section of the Cabbage Patch Kids on sale, it turns out. And your mother is telling you that they are in her budget, but she doesn't think that they are the right ones for you. You are elated, then confused. Why would she think that? And then you look at them, one by one, row after row. What do they have in common? They are black, all of them, the ones on sale. You think about it. They could be your adopted child, why not? You're still too young to know how babies are made, so you don't think much deeper. You reach out to a pigtailed black one in a yellow tracksuit and you tell your mother that this is your daughter. Her name turns out to be Clover Stephanie, and you still have her somewhere in storage. Her cheek is a bit scraped and it looks white underneath. It bothers you, that fact. It bothers you also that you have Clover only because she was on sale, because she was black, but that was an important first lesson about America, so maybe it was worth it. 2, you want to be a good student, the best, in fact. One way to do this is to follow directions. In kindergarten, this is a big goal of yours since English is still new to you. One rule is that at lunchtime, you must eat your dessert last. Dessert is usually a piece of fruit, but apparently it is hard for kids to obey this rule. Not you, you always get it right. Your best friend is a blonde girl named Angela, whom all the teachers love. She doesn't always play by the rules, but she always gets away with it. One day she eats her cantaloupe before spaghetti. This shocks you. You try to tell her to stop it, that she can't do this, but she does it. Without any fear, a smile even. You tell her to stop or you'll have to tell on her. She smiles with a mouthful of cantaloupe. She's fearless. You tell her to stop right now because you're truly about to tell. She laughs, more cantaloupe on her tongue. You can't take it anymore. You tell on her. The teaching assistant is a big man named Mr. Mondo, and he is tough on the rules. He will take care of this. You walk right up to him, and as much as it pains you, you point right at her. Angela is eating her dessert first, Mr. Mondo. At this point, Angela is still, a look of fright on her face. She is not taunting you anymore. Good, you think. This might teach her. Mr. Mondo walks with you to her. He asks if she did it. She nods sadly. Sorry, she says. He says nothing and pauses. Then he turns to you and looks angry. He says one word, snitcher. He walks away and Angela smiles and you begin to cry. And after you learn what the word means, though from the start you know it's bad, once again you learn a lesson about America. 3, your best friend in second grade lives in the good part of town. So does almost everyone at your elementary school. You live in the bad part of town. No one you know lives there. Your dad drives a Pinto while your best friend's dad drives a Rolls Royce. She hates it. You go to her house. It is a mansion in the hills. She has so many expensive toys, numerous Cabbage Patch dolls, all white, even though she is Vietnamese. She was born in America, unlike you. Her dad drives a truck for a living, while yours is a professor. Another lesson you one day realize. 4, the usual substitute teacher, the one everyone in your grade sees most often, makes funny jokes, and one is that he calls you my Iranian sweetheart. You hate this because you know Americans don't like Iran, and you don't want to be singled out and teased, especially not because of being Iranian, but he always does this. Another teacher sticks his thumb in your mouth when he spots you sticking your tongue out at a friend. You don't know what it means, but it feels wrong. Years later, a science teacher offers you massages after class. You decline. A few grades down, a German teacher tells you you're so beautiful. He whispers it to you and you never come near him again. That same year, a librarian tells you about male and female plugs too eagerly, demonstrating over and over. Another teacher laughs when students say you look like Anne Frank and makes a joke about him looking like a German soldier. You remember his bad breath on your face as he laughs at you, all over you. Are there Jews still in Iran, he asks you, but you don't answer. In America, adults are inappropriate, you realize. Maybe a lesson about this place, but maybe not. 5, you become editor-in-chief of your high school paper, your one and only dream in life as you know it. For 2 years, you have this post. You love nothing more. When your advisor is fired, a gay man, you are incensed and you walk out and your staff follows. You are now seen as a rebel. This somehow seems very American. Your fearlessness also seems very American. You are blonde Angela with the cantaloupe. You must belong here if you think you can afford to leave. 6. You go to college in New York, your dream, and you get your first internship at the Village Voice. You are a teenager and a scholarship kid, and you have no money, and it does not occur to you that students ask their parents for money. You're left wondering how you can make this work, so you learn to jump trains. Another scholarship kid teaches you. You get good at this. You go to your internship 3 times a week, and you use some change for dinner, Pop-Tarts from the vending machine. And then you jump the train back. Part of it is you must look well-dressed to do this. You pretend you're dressing up for your internship, but you're doing it because they suspect you less if you look fancy. One time you get caught, a female conductor. She tells you she's been watching you for months. You have no money to give her, so she tells you your luck is up and she's kicking you off. It's midnight and the stop is Mount Vernon, a bad neighborhood. You are let out there and an old man offers you a drive home. You have no other choice. You stop jumping trains. 7. Sometimes you stay out all night. You miss the last train back to college upstate on purpose, knowing the next one is at 6 a.m. No worries, the clubs are open all night. You go to them and you lose yourself in them. In America, you fit in at clubs more than anywhere else. They are for you. It's there that people accept you most. Very little matters in the forever night of a club, and you learn then to trust darkness more than light. 8. You go on your year abroad to Oxford. You joke that you're doing it to dry out from drugs and drinking, but this is somewhat true. There you find more clubs and more drugs and drinking. They call you American Express, that group of boys you sleep with. You're amazed they call you American. 9. At age 19, you are raped. At age 20, you are raped again. This strikes you as something that happens to American girls, a rite of passage. You tell no one, which American girls seem to do too, or not do. 10. You see 9/11 outside your East Village window, and you remember your first nightmares as a recent immigrant in the 80s. Men in dark clothing with machine guns and machetes loose on city streets. They were terrorists and you were the hostages. In your dream, it's always in Iran. In your dream, you were safe in America, but not in reality, you realize. Your old world has come for you. This is what being an American looks like now, you think, as you take your shoes off in an airport security line for the first time. 11. You become a published author, an American author, no, an Iranian American author. Never does the hyphen matter more than when you were an author, it seems. 12. In your teens, you contemplate suicide. In your 20s, you contemplate suicide. In your 30s, you contemplate suicide. Before turning 40, you wonder how many more times you will contemplate suicide. You wonder if you'd have been happier in that other life you were meant to live, the one where you stayed in Iran and maybe got married and had kids and maybe never became a writer. Maybe you would have already died of suicide. 13. You were 19 years an American. You became an American in November 2001, and you realized you could have had a child in that time. You have no kids, no husband, no home you own, no roots, no real reason to be here. Trump becomes president and your old country is on the list of one of the 6 countries of the Muslim ban. You're suddenly just a Muslim. No one doubts your brownness anymore. You realize that every day is a lesson in America, the real America, the violent one. You remember blonde Angela with the cantaloupe glistening in her laughing mouth, and you think for the first time, maybe she was laughing at you. Why would you think you'd get anywhere? On Facebook, you beg your white friends to do better. You ask them for ideas on where to live. You try to imagine another future they have. You wonder if your Americanness is forever and if you will die an American. You realize it might just be as hard to shake being an American as it was to become one in the first place. You realize with joy that you will die an American. You realize with agony that you will die an American. You realize with horror and confusion and fear and disbelief that you will die an American. Somehow it is harder to imagine than dying.
Wow. Thank you, Porochista. That was amazing. Everyone, please show Porochista some love in the chat there. That was amazing. What an ending. Yeah, Alexa, I totally agree. What an ending. I'm going to put the link here to pick up a copy of Porochista's essay collection, Brown Album. You will not be disappointed. It's really wonderful. Yeah, can I'm going to open this up for questions in a minute, but I'm going to start. And actually, I have a question just to build on Kyla's comment there. Porochista, specifically for you, because that was so interesting, because I often teach the last essay, How to Write Iranian America. And that also is in the second person. It's struck me too, the second person use here. Is that voice just feel, why that voice? Why is that one that you've returned to?
Well, those are probably literally my only 2 essays in second person, because I actually discourage my students from trying second person all the time, just not because you can't, but it's just very difficult. Mostly like for mechanical reasons. It's actually really hard to pull off tenses and things in second person. So I wrote that essay you're talking about, the last essay, is like a 3,000 word essay. And so to pull, this one is short, but to pull off, second person, a very long essay format, you're really having to think in like inverted first person, but like often in present tense. That doesn't really work with, I don't know, it's really confusing. But I think like for certain essays that are like, for me, like more, maybe more political or more, I'm really trying to get the audience to like be in my position. And that's the whole point of the essay. To me, it's just like thematically appropriate. But I don't like it just for its own sake. Like, I don't always love it. I mean, I know Lori Moore is now kind of a pariah in the literary world, but like I think of her collection, Self-Help, with all the second person stories. And I think that's like one of the only books I know where someone pulls off like second person for a full collection. But I think you have to be very, very like strategic and careful with it. But I think it can be powerful. Like I really like reading this essay out loud, because I think it has a certain directness and a certain effect, and it's kind of relentless and like boom, boom, boom with like nothing numbers. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, and the numbering in the piece also kind of adds to that kind of sense of build. Yeah. A question, and if you in the audience have a question, please type it in into the chat. This is a question for all 3 of you, though. I mean, these works all look back on parts of your life that are years ago. What kind of research do you do? Whether that's like, do you have journals that you go back to? Do you just kind of like sit with your memories? How do you kind of get back into those past moments in order to recreate them for the reader so vividly? Anyone? Meredith, Justin, Porochista, anyone?
I had a lot of different strategies. Some of them gleaned from Porochista, in fact. As a former and probably future Porochista student, like I did work on a memory journal where I just like wrote down, and this is like a Porochista exercise where I wrote down every single thing that I can remember. Like it took several days about my life, but just sort of various strategies. The thing that was very clear to me is that because I've done investigative journalism, that I couldn't take out a recorder and have like a pad in front of a person, because it puts my brain in a completely different mode. And so I had casual conversations with family members and friends. I lived in the Philippines for 4 months, when I was drafting the beginning of the book. I ran off to Guatemala, like for like a month at a time to finish the book, because I just felt like I couldn't be responsible to anybody for my emotions. And so I needed to be in a place where like I didn't know anybody in order to like excavate all of those memories and feelings. So yeah, so my strategies were kind of haphazard that way.
Yeah, it's emotionally, it is like such hard work to go back to things and relive them and have those things kind of bubble up.
Well, especially like talking about people that you were so passionately in love with. while, like you're also so passionately in love with your husband and, like not wanting him in the room next to you somehow, like that was something that was important. It was important to be alone, to like relive those moments, right?
Justin, what about you?
I think my process was also pretty haphazard. There were definitely moments where, especially in that section that I read from, and really that whole chapter, there's essentially 3 timelines, and keeping them straight took a little bit of work, and remembering what happened when took some work, and I had to go back and I would figure out like certain dates didn't match, and so I'd have to figure out like when things actually happened. And some of that was true, I think, throughout the book. There were definitely stuff I checked against other people's recollections, especially my mom and my sister and my wife. But beyond a certain point, to be really honest with you, it was a book about a relationship between me and my father, and he's not here anymore. And so anything I would have checked against him wasn't really possible. And one of the things that was interesting to me about this was that feeling of kind of circling back and looking at what I was able to remember and what I wasn't. And so one of the things the book is really interested in is the places where memory kind of lapses or falters or loses track of itself or comes back to certain things. Like there are definitely scenes in this book that are really explicit. Like I remembered it going some way, and then I put together enough evidence to like complicate or falsify my own perception or the kind of story I was telling myself, or the story that my father was telling himself in some cases, where I was actually able to figure out, at least to my own satisfaction, that there were certain like very closely held ideas he had that I actually think he was wrong about. And then there are other places, like right after the part where I stopped reading, it's a lot about he and I being in the car and these very long conversations we had, which was a key part of our relationship. And one thing I realized writing about this is I know almost nothing about the actual content of those conversations. I mean, this is a man I talk to almost every day of my life for hours, oftentimes. And what I really remember is like the structure and the form of those exchanges, but very little of what actually filled them, which I thought was really interesting. And I made almost no effort to go and reconstruct any of that stuff, because in a sense, it didn't really matter. What mattered was just that we did it and the kind of exchange we were having, much more than like whatever bullshit we were harping on any given day.
That's really interesting. So that kind of giving that sense to the reader of what that relationship was like, more so than the actual like the things you said.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. Porochista, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, similar. The only thing that I found, well, with Brown Album, it's like essays that I often wrote in the moment. So like the New York Times would send me an email and say, can you write about this new Iranian reality TV show, Shahs of Sunset? So it was like very easy to then like just write whatever in the moment, and then, use anecdotes from my past that were tie in. So I had formulas for these essays, but like for my memoir, Sick, that was actually a lot harder because I had to take like chunks of my life where I was actually too ill to like think clearly. But during that time I wasn't journaling either, but what I was doing was sending mass emails to my group of friends. So like, and in that group of friends was a lot of writers. So like a group of like 25 writers and maybe a few hometown friends, people I knew in New York mainly. I would write them these long updates, and I would need like, and I would say like, can you check on me? Here's what I'm doing. Or like, cause I always lived alone with my dog. It's like, that's just been my life. But that was my only way of communicating like with the world often, because I'd be bedridden. And so my friends would want to know how I'm doing, and I would just like write these emails. So the emails became like diary entries. So that was something I used a lot. And just, I am one of those people, Meredith laughs about this, but I literally have like 800,000 emails. Like Meredith is an inbox 0 Cancer, and I'm like an 800,000 Capricorn. That's just who we are. And the thing is like, but I love it in a way just because like I've never deleted an email. I mean, I don't look at the brands and all that crap, but I just like go back. Like I opened my Gmail in 2005, and I still look at like the emails I sent in 2005, and they're cringy, whatever. But like I was always like a prolific email writer, so I can, the drafts also, like the emails I didn't send, kind of operate like journals. So for me, that's a big reservoir. I swear, Meredith, it's not an excuse. That's really
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm with you, Meredith. I archive. They're still there, just not in the inbox.
I should do. I know.
But I understand. My wife is it's an inbox expansive philosophy. Great question here from Alexa, who is a wonderful writer herself. She asks, how did you decide where in time to begin telling your stories in the memoirs or in the essay?
I guess I'll start. The memoir begins at my 20th Harvard reunion, which is sort of I mean, like at the time, there were several prologue drafts that I wrote, but that's the one that stuck because I think, like reunions are always the point when you compare the person that you've become with the person that you have been. And in my case, like there's a way in which I felt simultaneously radically different than when I was an undergrad, and yet at the same time, intensely the same. And I really enjoyed that tension. And that was something that that I wanted to write about. So that's sort of where the book, the beginning of the book, situates itself.
Justin, how about you?
This was a book I didn't really know I was writing until I was maybe halfway or 2/3 of the way through it, depending exactly how you count. So I think a lot of it is rooted in 2017 and 2018, which was the last months of my father's life, as it turned out, and then the first year after his passing. And so I think that's kind of the core of it, but a lot of what I was doing at that time was thinking and rethinking and revisiting, and so it kind of goes out from there. It was I think most of it is the last 10 years, like 2007 to 2017. That was where I sort of located his and my relationship and the zone that I was most interested in focusing on. It was sort of the beginning of his health problems and decline. It was also, around when I was 22 or 23 or something, so sort of the beginning of my proper adulthood, I guess you'd say. And so that was pretty much it. And I actually tried to stay as narrowly within those bands as possible. It wasn't always. I ended up sort of writing some biographical stuff about him and generational stuff about both my parents and their families, but really only kind of let that filter in on an as needed basis when the story really demanded it. I don't know if that's the best way to write a memoir, but there was that very conscious narrowness, like, allowed me to figure out how to do it, I guess. I don't know if I would have figured it out otherwise.
PK, what about you? I feel like all in your essays and in your memoir, they feel very expansive in terms of time. You often dip back into childhood.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like you have to know where your focal point is when you write either an essay or a memoir. Like, it doesn't matter. You have to know like where your target point is. And then you have to like leave enough room to arrive there. So that's always, I'm like very much like an architect or construction worker when I write. I really like structure, and I really like the idea of like building things, right? And so for me, it's like if you have a point that you're going to get to, like, for me, like my Lyme crisis or car accident or some of these episodes in the essays, I just have to like figure out exactly what that climax or turning point or like the focus of the essay is. And then I have to like create what the road to that point is. So then like in my notes, my rough drafts, I would think of like all the variations on that theme or all the anecdotes that add up to that particular moment. And I would sort of like, but there would have to be enough space to arrive there. So for me, like to figure out what the theme of an essay is or like the point of an essay, you always have to like figure out what the journey is to get to the point, and that's how it reveals itself. That's how the meaning becomes clear to you, is in that journey. So I really, yeah, I tend to like go really wide and expand, like you said, in my childhood, so I can arrive.
That's very, very helpful. Writerly advice. Thank you. Thanks all of you. I have one more question because I'm mindful of your time, which is, as I guess a topical one. Today we've got a very slim volume of essays from Zadie Smith that were written at the start of the quarantine, of the pandemic, and I guess that question is constantly like, are you writing? And if now, like, have you been writing? I know also all three of you have put out books during this time period, and I know often authors are asked to, write occasional pieces for their book launch. So are you writing? Have you been writing? Are you journaling and trying to keep like thoughts on this time period, even if for something later? Who wants it?
Oh, I'll jump in. The real answer is no, not very much. I haven't been writing very much. A little bit here and there. I've been taking on more review work. I like the structure that, I always like writing book reviews and criticism and stuff, but I think in this moment, the structure of it, of that kind of work, allows me to feel creative and engaged, without having to like make stuff up from scratch. And most of the time I'm a fiction writer, and so that's not happening at all right now. The only thing that I wrote original, I guess, that came out kind of around this book was this thing I did for N+1 that they put up yesterday. Just sort of an essay about the last drive that I took before the shelter-in-place order came down. This book is very much about driving. My dad and I take this road trip. I spend a lot of time driving around the Deep South as a visiting writer at University of Southern Mississippi. And right before the shelter-in-place thing happened, I was a visiting writer at the University of Montana. And so I was here in Portland at the end of my spring break. And then I had to go to Missoula, empty out an apartment, and get back here. It was about 1,100 miles in about 30 hours. And so I ended up writing a piece about that, which I had not really planned to do. But that was an interesting drive. It was an interesting essay, and N+1, like I said, very generously put it up yesterday. It tied into the book in certain ways. Go on a road trip and think about the book you wrote about road trips, kind of thing. But that's really it.
That's cool. I will have to check that out. That sounds really cool. What about you, Porochista? Are you?
I owe another book, so my 2-book deal with this essay for the Knopf Doubleday group, I owe a novel, but like Justin, I find fiction is not coming easily. So I'm definitely struggling with fiction. And then I said, once this essay collection was, because I never really wanted to be a nonfiction writer. I don't really identify as a nonfiction writer, even though I think of myself as a journalist, because I had real journalism training separate to the essay work. But fiction is really my love. But I said this essay collection would be like the last time I write essays. I don't want any more essays. Because Roxane Gay famously says she feels like an essay vending machine. And I just started to feel like I just write way too many essays. But hilariously, during lockdown, I was literally on deadline for 6 essays, 7 maybe. So I have a ton of essays coming out, and I've been writing a lot of essays. Partially for me, essays, to be very honest, is they're my bread and butter. I get, paid pretty decently for my essays now, and people usually ask me for them. I haven't pitched an essay in years, so I've been lucky to have people approach me for them. And if it's a good idea, or if it's a publication I like, I've been doing a lot for Condé Nast Traveler, and I really like their editors for some reason. And so, yeah, so I've been doing essay work. But I the only other place I really do a lot of writing is in this Substack, my little newsletter, my Substack. It's I have a little list there, and I just like that space because I can just think through certain ideas, and it doesn't really feel like writing. It kind of feels like my old live journal a little bit, which I like. It's not very pressury, but yeah. And I did do a book review. I did a thing for Book Forum on a Frida Kahlo book. I do also find book reviewing really meditative. But yeah, I don't know. It's weird. Like in a way I am writing, but it doesn't feel like writing. I'm trying to read a lot. That's like, I'm always trying to read a lot. And I've been really focused more on like reading. Because when I can't write, reading is not really a problem. I always love to read, so.
Yeah, same. And if you guys out there should check out Porochista's Substack, because it's awesome. And yeah, some of your nonfiction work in that is also just wonderfully like creative. I think the best thing for me about as a frequent reader of nonfiction is seeing newsletters that are just like completely unbounded from traditional essay structure, and that's really exciting to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, Hannah Bay rightly points out that's Cosmo behind you. Yeah. Hi, Cosmo.
No, my dog. He usually just like lays low behind me, but today he's very active. So yeah, there he is.
Yay. Meredith.
Ronnie's behind me too.
Oh,
she's sleeping. I'm one of those people, like the weird side effect of having such a tumultuous childhood is that my writing space for me is my space of order. So when the world is like really chaotic, I oddly, like process my anxieties through writing. So I have been writing a fair amount. And I can't even remember who told me this, but somebody, it might have been Taya Albrecht. I'm trying to remember like a writer friend said, like you should try to at least get a foothold on a new project before your book comes out, because it's very hard to then start a project coming out of having just published a book. So I took that advice to heart and started a novel, like before, while I was like copy editing, while I was going through the various stages of my book publication. So I've been working on that novel, which I'm super excited about. And then also I actually got stranded in Guatemala and had to walk across the border by land to Mexico to get back to the States during the COVID lockdown. So I'm writing an essay about that experience, but I'm not as fast as Sadie Smith at processing that experience.
I think few people are, but that's really exciting. Both that essay and I look forward to reading, and the novel, amazing. Oh, you guys, it's so wonderful to see the three of you on screen and to hear your words and wisdom about writing, and all of you out there as well. Thank you so much. Thank you, Justin. Thanks, Porochista. Thanks, Meredith. Please check out their books and come back next week. I'll put the link here again. Next week will be Thursday, not Tuesday, and that's the fundraiser for the Bink COVID Relief Fund with Jericho Brown, Carmen Maria Mikado, Celeste Eng, and Karen Russell. That's hosted. I'll be hosting that in collaboration with the Center for Fiction. So please come on back. Thank you again, tonight's readers. Thank you to great audience. Thanks to the Literary Hub. You'll find this archived on their virtual book channel. Until next week, everybody, stay healthy, stay optimistic, and keep reading books. Thank you again. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Brian. This is great.
This is wonderful.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye. Oh, maybe we can say that.